Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been asked to tell this story before. By my wife, by the department psychologist, by 3 different journalists who somehow got my number. I never did, not because I don't remember it, I remember every second, but because I don't know how to make someone understand what it feels like to watch something impossible happen right in front of you, and then have to file a report about it like it was just another Tuesday night on the job. My name is Kenton Roussel. I was a Louisiana state trooper for 19 years, most of that time spent working the highways between Lafayette and Lake Charles. I grew up in Vermilion Parish, so I knew those roads like I knew my own face in the mirror. Every curve, every mile marker, every spot where the fog rolled in thick off the marshes. I thought I'd seen everything those highways had to show me. I was wrong. This happened in March of 2019. I'd been working night shifts for about 3 months straight, covering for a trooper who'd had back surgery. I didn't mind. Night shifts were quieter, mostly. You'd get your speeders, your drunk drivers, occasional accidents. But there was also a lot of nothing, just you and the road and the darkness pressing in on all sides. Some troopers hated it. I found it peaceful most of the time. The night in question started like any other. I clocked in at 11, grabbed coffee from the break room, checked my vehicle, and headed out. The weather report said fog was expected after midnight, rolling in from the Gulf. That wasn't unusual for March. What was unusual was how fast it came in, and how thick it got. I was on Highway 14 around 1 in the morning, somewhere between Kaplan and Abbeville when it hit. 1 minute I could see maybe a quarter mile ahead, and the next I was swimming in white. I slowed down to about 35, turned on my fog lights, and kept my eyes locked on the center line. Out there, in weather like that, the center line was your lifeline. You lose that, you're driving blind. I'd been crawling along for maybe 20 minutes when I saw them. Headlights. 2 of them, maybe 100 yards ahead, moving in my direction. They were in the oncoming lane, which was fine, except they were weaving. Not a lot, but enough to notice. The kind of weaving that usually meant someone was either drunk or falling asleep at the wheel. I slowed down even more and pulled slightly to the right, giving them room. But as they got closer, or as I got closer to them, something felt wrong. The lights weren't getting any bigger. When you're approaching another vehicle, even in fog, the headlights grow. They get brighter, more defined. These stayed exactly the same size, exactly the same brightness, like they were keeping a fixed distance from me no matter how much I closed the gap. I stopped my cruiser completely, just sat there in the middle of the highway, fog swirling around me, watching those lights. They stopped too, just hung there in the white 2 pale circles, perfectly still. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds waiting to see what would happen. Nothing did. The lights didn't move, didn't flicker. Just sat there watching me like eyes. I radioed it in. Unit 227 to dispatch. I've got a possible 1050 on Highway 14, approximately 2 miles east of Kaplan. Vehicle appears stationary in the oncoming lane. Fog conditions severe. Requesting backup. Copy that, 227. Unit 194 is 20 minutes out. Proceed with caution. 20 minutes. A lot can happen in 20 minutes. I pulled my cruiser onto the shoulder and got out. The fog was so thick I could barely see my own hood. The air was wet and cold. That particular Louisiana cold that gets into your bones no matter how many layers you're wearing. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward the lights. I walked for maybe 50 yards. The lights stayed exactly where they were. Not getting closer, not getting farther, just there. I called out, "This is Louisiana State Police. If you can hear me, stay where you are and turn off your engine." Nothing. No response. No engine sound. No doors opening. Just the fog and the silence and those two unblinking lights. I kept walking. 60 yards. 70. The lights still hadn't moved, but I should have been on top of them by now. At this distance, I should have been able to see the outline of the vehicle, the shape of the grille, something. But there was nothing except those lights, floating in the white. I stopped. Something was very wrong. I turned around to look back at my cruiser. I could still see it, barely. The red and blue lights on the roof cutting through the fog, the headlights throwing two pale beams into the white. It was maybe 80 yards behind me, which meant the other vehicle should have been right in front of me. Close enough to touch. I turned back around. The lights were gone. I don't mean they'd turned off. I don't mean they'd driven away. I mean they were gone. Vanished, like they'd never been there. 1 second I was looking right at them, and the next I was staring at empty fog. I stood there for a long moment, flashlight beam cutting back and forth through the white, heart pounding in my ears. There was nothing. No vehicle, no taillights disappearing into the distance, no tire tracks on the wet asphalt. Nothing except me and the fog, and the road stretching out into darkness. I walked back to my cruiser slowly, checking over my shoulder every few steps. I kept expecting to see those lights reappear behind me, but they didn't. By the time I got back to my vehicle, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Fog does strange things. Plays tricks on your eyes, your mind. Maybe it was just headlights from somewhere else reflecting off the moisture. Maybe it was swamp gas, or lightning from a distant storm, or any of the other explanations that people use when they don't want to admit they've seen something that doesn't make sense. I got back in the cruiser and sat there for a minute, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being watched. That's when I noticed my radar unit. The display was showing a vehicle. Moving target, heading southbound, 53 miles per hour. Except I was facing north, and the road in front of me was empty. I looked at the display again, thinking maybe I was reading it wrong, but the numbers were clear. Target acquired. Distance 0.3 miles. Speed 53 mph. Yes, southbound, but there was nothing there. I could see at least a quarter mile now. The fog was starting to lift a little, and the highway was empty in both directions. No headlights, no taillights, no vehicle of any kind. Just wet asphalt and darkness and the distant tree line. I watched the radar for about 30 seconds. The target kept moving according to the display. 0.4 miles now. 0.5. Still 53 miles per hour. Still southbound. Still on a road that was completely empty. I put the cruiser in drive and followed it. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe something else. Something that felt like I was supposed to follow. I accelerated to 60 and watched the radar. The distance wasn't closing. Whatever I was tracking was staying exactly ahead of me, matching my speed like it knew I was coming. I pushed it to 70. The target stayed at 0.3 miles, 80. Same distance. It was impossible. I was doing 80 on a fog-slicked highway, and I couldn't close a 0.3 of a mile gap with something supposedly going 53. And then, ahead of me, I saw the headlights again. Just for a second. 2 pale circles in the fog, exactly where my radar said they'd be. They flashed once, twice, 3 times, like someone was signaling me. Then they veered hard to the right, off the road, and vanished. I hit my brakes and pulled onto the shoulder right at that spot. I got out again, flashlight sweeping across the drainage ditch and the field beyond. The fog was definitely thinner here. I could see maybe 100 yards, but there was nothing. No car in the ditch, no tracks in the muddy shoulder, no sign that any vehicle had ever left the road. I was about to get back in my cruiser and chalk the whole thing up to equipment malfunction and sleep deprivation when I saw it. Just beyond the tree line, maybe 200 yards into the field, there was a light. Not headlights this time. Something smaller, dimmer. A flashlight maybe, or a lantern. It was moving through the trees, bobbing up and down like someone was walking. I called it in again. Dispatch 227. I've got a possible individual on foot in a field approximately 2 miles east of Kaplan, north side of Highway 14. I'm going to investigate. Copy 227. Use caution. I climbed over the drainage ditch and started across the field. It had rained earlier in the week, and the ground was soft. My boots sank into the mud with every step. The light kept moving ahead of me, staying just at the edge of visibility, leading me deeper into the trees. I followed it for maybe 10 minutes. The field gave way to a thin strip of woods, cypress and oak, and then I was at the edge of a bayou. The water was black and still, reflecting the stars that were just starting to peek through the thinning fog. And there, on the bank, was a car. It was a sedan, dark blue or black, half submerged in the water. The front end was in the bayou up to the doors, and the back end was angled up on the bank like it had come down the slope at high speed and just plowed straight in. The headlights were off. Everything was off. It looked like it had been there for a while. There was mud on the roof, dead leaves on the trunk. But I knew it hadn't been there that morning. I'd worked this stretch of road the previous week, and there hadn't been any car. I approached carefully, one hand on my weapon. This is Louisiana State Police. If anyone is in the vehicle, make yourself known. Nothing. Not a sound except the crickets and the frogs and my own breathing. I shined my flashlight through the rear window. The back seat was empty. I moved around to the driver's side, boots sinking into the soft bank, water soaking through my pants up to my knees. The driver's door was open, not all the way, just slightly ajar, like someone had tried to get out but hadn't quite made it. I pulled the door open the rest of the way. The interior light didn't come on. Battery was probably dead. But my flashlight showed me enough. The front seats were empty. No driver, no passenger. No blood, no signs of injury, nothing to indicate that anyone had been hurt. Just a car in a bayou with its doors open and nobody inside. I checked the registration. The car belonged to a woman named Delphine Mouton, address in Crowley. I ran the plates through my unit when I got back to my cruiser. No outstanding warrants. No record of the vehicle being reported stolen or involved in any accident. I called it in as an abandoned vehicle and requested a tow truck, then drove back to the spot where I'd seen the car go off the road. Or where I thought I'd seen it go off the road. There were no skid marks, no broken branches, no torn up grass, no sign that anything had left the highway at that location. The shoulder was undisturbed, the drainage ditch was smooth and unbroken. Whatever I'd followed into that field, it hadn't come from the road. The tow truck arrived about an hour later. Clyde from Robichaux's Towing, a guy I'd worked with a dozen times before. He looked at the car's location and scratched his head. "How the hell did it get back here?" he asked. "I don't know. I just found it. There's no road, no path, nothing. Someone would have had to carry it through the woods. I know." He looked at me for a long moment, like he was waiting for me to explain further. When I didn't, he just shook his head and went to get his equipment. It took him nearly 2 hours to get the car out of the bayou. I stood there the whole time, watching, waiting to see if there was a body inside that I'd missed. There wasn't. The car was empty, completely empty. No personal belongings, no purse, no cell phone, nothing. Just mud and water and dead leaves. I went back to the station and filed my report. I kept it factual. Found the vehicle at such and such location. No signs of the driver, no evidence of foul play. I left out the part about the headlights that wouldn't get closer. I left out the radar tracking something on an empty road. I left out the light in the trees that led me right to the car. How do you put something like that in an official report? The next day, I tried to contact Delphine Mouton. The phone number on file was disconnected. I drove to the address in Crowley. It was a small house on a quiet street, well maintained, flowers in the front yard. A woman answered the door, maybe 60 years old, and when I asked for Delphine, her face went pale. Delphine passed away, she said quietly. Almost 6 years ago now. I'm sorry to hear that. Do you mind if I ask what happened? She drowned. Her car went off the road in a fog storm. They didn't find her body for 3 days. Some trooper finally spotted the car in a bayou off Highway 14. Highway 14, east of Kaplan. Yes, that's right. How did you know? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The woman, Delphine's mother it turned out, invited me in and showed me a photograph. Delphine had been 32 when she died. Dark hair, dark eyes, a shy smile. She'd been a nurse at the hospital in Abbeville, working late shifts. The night she died, she'd been driving home after a double shift. The fog had come in fast. They figured she'd gotten disoriented, missed a curve, gone off the road. Her body was found in the bayou, still in the driver's seat, seatbelt on. The cause of death was drowning. She was always such a careful driver, her mother told me. That's what I could never understand. She knew those roads so well. She knew to slow down in fog. I don't know how she could have missed that curve. People make mistakes, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. No, not Delphine, not on that road. She drove it every day for 8 years. Something happened that night, something that made her go off the road. I've always believed that. I've just never been able to prove it. She looked at me then with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Why are you asking about her? After all this time? Her car was found last night, I said, off Highway 14 in a bayou. Her mother stared at me. I'm sorry? Her vehicle. It was recovered from a bayou east of Kaplan last night. That's not possible. That car was destroyed years ago. I signed the paperwork myself. It was towed to a junkyard and crushed. I didn't know what to say to that. The VIN number matched, the plates matched, the registration matched. It was Delphine Mouton's car, and according to her mother, it had been crushed into scrap metal 6 years ago. I thanked the woman for her time and left. I sat in my cruiser outside her house for a long time, trying to make sense of what was happening. None of it fit. None of it was possible. A car that had been destroyed appearing in the same bayou where it had sunk 6 years earlier. Headlights on an empty road. A radar tracking something that wasn't there. I requested the accident report from 2013. It took a few days to come through. It had been archived, but when I finally got it, I read it 3 times. The trooper who'd found Delphine's car was a guy named Marcus Webb, retired now. His report was straightforward. Discovered vehicle submerged in bayou, victim deceased at the scene. Evidence consistent with driver losing control in heavy fog. No witnesses, no other vehicles involved. Case closed. But there was one detail that caught my attention. In the notes section, Webb had written, possible equipment malfunction during initial investigation. Radar unit, registered moving target on empty roadway, disregard. I called Marcus Webb that afternoon. He was living in Sulphur, enjoying his retirement, not particularly eager to talk about old cases. But when I mentioned Delphine Mouton's name, his tone changed. What about her? I told him what had happened. The headlights that wouldn't approach. The radar hit on an empty road. The car appearing in the same bayou where he'd found it 6 years ago. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You saw the lights too, didn't you?" he finally said. "Yes, and the radar. The target that shouldn't have been there. Yes." Another silence. I could hear him breathing, deciding whether to say more. I never told anyone this. Not my wife, not my captain, nobody. But the night I found that car, the night she died, I was led there. Same as you. Lights on the road that wouldn't get closer. Radar showing something that wasn't there. I followed it for miles, and then it went off the road, and when I went looking, there was the car. Why didn't you put that in your report? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Would you? Would you write up an official report that says you found a body because a ghost led you to it? He had a point. I hadn't put it in mine either. "Let me ask you something," he said. "When you found the car last night, was there a body inside?" "No, it was empty." "She's still in that bayou. Her body was recovered after 3 days, but part of her is still there, whatever that means. Whatever part of a person stays behind when something terrible happens to them. And I think she's been trying to tell someone something ever since. I just don't know what." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Part of her is still there. Maybe that was true. Maybe when someone dies the way Delphine Mouton died, alone, in the dark, in the cold water, maybe something gets left behind. An echo, an imprint. Something that repeats the last moments over and over, trying to find someone who will pay attention. But why now? Why me? Why had Delphine Mouton's ghost, if that's what it was, decided to show itself to me 6 years after her death? I went back to the bayou the next night. I'm not sure what I was expecting to find. I just felt like I needed to be there, like the story wasn't finished yet. I parked on the shoulder at the same spot where I'd seen the lights veer off the road. The fog was thinner that night, just wisps of white drifting through the trees. I got out and walked to the edge of the field, looking towards the tree line where I'd seen the light bobbing through the darkness. There was nothing there, just trees and stars and the distant glimmer of the bayou under the moon. I was about to leave when I saw it. A glint of something in the grass, maybe 20 feet from the road. I walked over and shined my flashlight on it. It was a shoe, a woman's shoe, flat-soled, dark blue, half buried in the mud. It looked old. The leather was cracked and faded, but it wasn't decomposed. It looked like it had been there for years and also like it had been placed there yesterday. I don't know how else to describe it. I bagged it as evidence, even though I wasn't sure what case it was evidence for. When I got back to the station, I ran it through the system. No match to any open investigation. I was about to file it as found property when something made me stop. I pulled up Delphine Mouton's accident report again. There was a list of personal effects recovered from the scene. Purse, cell phone, keys, shoes. Shoes, plural. But when I looked at the evidence photos, there was only one shoe in the car. A dark blue flat found on the passenger side floor. The report noted that the other shoe was missing, presumed lost in the bayou during recovery. I looked at the shoe I'd found. Dark blue, flat-soled, identical to the one in the evidence photo. I went back to Delphine's mother the next day. I didn't tell her about the shoe. I didn't want to upset her without knowing more. But I asked if I could see more photographs of Delphine. She brought out an album, and I looked through it slowly, not sure what I was searching for. And then I saw it. A photo of Delphine at what looked like a work party, standing with a group of other nurses, smiling at the camera. She was wearing the blue flats. But it wasn't the shoes that made me stop. It was the man standing behind her. He wasn't in the group, he was in the background, slightly out of focus near the door. He was looking directly at the camera with an expression that made my skin crawl. Not angry, not threatening, just watching. Aware. "Who is this?" I asked, pointing to the man. Delphine's mother looked at the photo and frowned. "I don't know. I've never noticed him before. Probably just someone who worked at the hospital." "Do you know if Delphine was having any problems before she died? Anyone bothering her, following her?" The mother hesitated. She didn't say anything specific. But the last few weeks before the accident, she seemed nervous. Kept checking her rearview mirror when she drove. Mentioned once that she thought someone was following her home from work. Did she report it? No. She said she was probably just imagining things. You know how those late shifts are. They make you jumpy. I took a picture of the photograph with my phone and enlarged the image of the man when I got back to my cruiser. His face was blurry, but there was enough detail to work with. Dark hair, heavy build, maybe 40 years old. I ran it through the facial recognition system but got no matches. I showed it to some of the older deputies and troopers, but nobody recognized him. Then I showed it to Marla Dupree. Marla was a sheriff's deputy in Vermilion Parish, had been for almost 30 years. She knew everyone and everything that happened in the area, and if something had gone on involving Delphine Mouton, Marla would know about it. She looked at the photo for a long time. "Where'd you get this?" "From Delphine's mother. It was taken a few weeks before she died." "I know who this is. His name is Roland Carriere. He used to do maintenance at the hospital. Got fired about a month before this woman died. Fired for what? Complaints from the nursing staff. Following them around, showing up at their homes uninvited, asking them out and not taking no for an answer. 3 different nurses filed complaints. Hospital let him go, but no charges were ever pressed." "Was Delphine one of the nurses who complained?" Marla shook her head. "Not that I know of, but that doesn't mean anything. A lot of women don't report that kind of thing, especially back then. They just try to handle it themselves, hope it goes away." "Where's Carriere now?" "Dead. Died about 4 years ago. Car accident out on Highway 90. Single vehicle, hit a tree, nobody else involved." She paused. "But here's the thing that always bothered me about that. I was one of the responders. When we got there, Carriere was still alive, just barely. He was trying to say something. I leaned in to hear, and what he said was, 'She keeps following me. She won't let me go.' Who keeps following him? He didn't say. He died right after that. I always assumed he was delirious, talking out of his head. But now I don't know." I sat with that for a while. Roland Carriere had been stalking nurses at the hospital. Delphine had been nervous in the weeks before her death, thought someone was following her. And then, she'd driven off the road in fog so thick she couldn't see. On a route she'd driven 1,000 times before. What if she hadn't just gotten disoriented? What if she'd been running from something, from someone? What if Carriere had been following her that night, and she'd been so focused on the headlights in her rearview mirror that she'd missed the curve? And what if, after she died, something in her had refused to let it go? What if part of her had stayed on that highway, waiting for someone to pay attention, to see what had really happened? I couldn't prove any of it. Carriere was dead, Delphine was dead, and there was no evidence of anything except an old photograph and a missing shoe. But I knew. I knew the way you know something that you've seen with your own eyes, even when your mind tells you it's impossible. I went back to the bayou one more time. It was late, well past midnight, and the highway was empty. I stood on the bank where Delphine's car had been found, twice now, 6 years apart, and I looked out at the dark water. "I don't know if you can hear me," I said, feeling foolish. "But I know what happened to you. I know he was following you. I know you were trying to get away from him, and he ran you off the road, and nobody ever figured it out until now. I'm sorry it took so long." The bayou was silent. No lights appeared. No ghosts materialized out of the fog. But the wind shifted, and for just a moment, I smelled something. Perfume, faint and floral, the kind a young woman might wear. Then it was gone, and there was only the smell of mud and water and the night. I filed a supplemental report the next day, noting the possible connection between Delphine Mouton and Roland Carriere. I knew nothing would come of it. Both of them were long dead, and there was no evidence that would hold up in any court. But I wanted it on record. I wanted someone, someday, to know what had really happened on Highway 14 in March of 2013. That was 6 years ago. I've never seen the headlights again. I've driven that stretch of road 100 times since then, in fog and rain and clear weather. And there's been nothing. No lights that won't approach, no radar hits on empty highways, no shoes in the grass. But I still think about her. Delphine Mouton, 32 years old, driving home from a late shift, watching her rear-view mirror, seeing headlights that wouldn't go away. I think about how scared she must have been, how alone. I think about her car going off the road and into the water, and the cold and the dark and the knowing that nobody was coming. And I think about the fact that something in her refused to give up. 6 years in that bayou, and she was still trying to tell someone what had happened to her. She couldn't rest until someone knew the truth, and she kept reaching out, night after night, until finally someone came along who was willing to follow the lights. I don't believe in ghosts. I want to be clear about that. I'm a state trooper, trained to deal in facts and evidence, and ghosts don't fit into that worldview. But I believe in what I saw. I believe in headlights that wouldn't get closer, and radar hits on empty roads, and a shoe in the grass that had been lost for 6 years. I believe that Delphine Mouton tried to tell me something, and I listened. And now the truth is on the record where it belongs. That's all she wanted. That's all any of us want when it comes down to it. To be seen, to be heard, to have someone pay attention to our story. I think about that a lot, driving the night shift on these empty Louisiana highways. I think about all the people who've died on these roads over the years, the accidents, the drownings, the bodies in the bayous, and I wonder how many of them are still trying to tell someone what happened to them. How many of them are out there right now, waiting in the fog, hoping someone will follow where they lead. I don't see the headlights anymore, like I said, but I look for them. Every night, every shift, I watch the darkness for those 2 pale circles of light that won't get closer no matter how fast you drive. I watch for Delphine, and for all the others like her, and I wait. Because if there's one thing I learned from that night, it's this: the dead are patient. They'll wait as long as they need to, and sooner or later they'll find someone who's willing to listen. I just hope when they find me again, I'll know what to do. I never told this to anyone, not until now. But last month, something happened that made me think it was time. I was driving past the bayou where Delphine's car had been found. I don't even take that route unless I have to, but I was running late and it was the fastest way. It was a clear night, no fog, no weather, and as I passed mile marker 12, my radar unit lit up. Moving target. Southbound. 53 miles per hour, the same speed Delphine had been going the night she died. I looked at the road ahead. It was empty. Not a car in sight, not a headlight, not a taillight, but the radar kept tracking. The numbers kept climbing. 0.3 miles, 0.4, 0.5. I didn't follow it. I wanted to. Part of me wanted to, but I didn't. I kept driving, eyes straight ahead, and eventually the radar went back to 0, and the night was quiet again. Maybe it was a malfunction. Maybe it was a glitch in the system, or a reflection off something, or one of those things that just happens sometimes and doesn't mean anything. Or maybe she's still out there. Maybe she's still trying to tell someone something. Something I missed. Something I didn't understand. Maybe the story isn't finished yet. If it isn't, I'll be ready. I'll follow the lights wherever they lead, and I'll listen to whatever they're trying to say. Because that's what we do. That's what it means to work these roads, to be responsible for the people who travel them. The living and the dead alike. We serve them all. People think Louisiana is just heat and humidity and Mardi Gras, but that's not the Louisiana I know. The Louisiana I know is the one you see at 3 in the morning on a parish road with no streetlights, when the fog comes up from the swamp and the only sound is the water moving through the cypress trees. That's a different place. That's a place where things happen that don't happen anywhere else. My name is Elias Boudreau. I spent 22 years as a Louisiana state trooper, mostly working the rural parishes west of Baton Rouge. Iberville, West Baton Rouge, Pointe Coupée, flat country, farming country, bayou country. The kind of place where you can drive for an hour and not see another car. The kind of place where if something goes wrong, you're on your own until backup arrives, and backup might be 45 minutes away. I'm not going to tell you I saw a ghost. I don't know what I saw. I've thought about it for 11 years now, turning it over in my mind, trying to find an explanation that makes sense. I haven't found one, so I'm just going to tell you what happened, and you can decide for yourself what it means. This was in September of 2014. Hurricane season, but we'd been lucky that year. No major storms, just the usual afternoon thunderstorms that blow through and leave everything steaming. I was working a night shift on Highway 1, the stretch that runs along the west side of the Atchafalaya Basin. It's a lonely road, especially at night. Sugarcane fields on one side, swamp on the other, and nothing but darkness in between. I got the call around 2:30 in the morning. Dispatch said there'd been a 911 call from a cell phone. Caller reporting a vehicle accident on Parish Road 77, about 5 miles off the highway. The caller said someone was in the water, said they could hear them calling for help. Then the call cut out. Dispatch tried to call back, but nobody answered. I was the closest unit, about 15 minutes away. I hit my lights and headed out. Parish Road 77 is the kind of road that doesn't show up on most maps. It's a single lane of cracked asphalt that winds through the swamp for about 3 miles before dead-ending at an old boat launch that nobody uses anymore. The trees come right up to the edge of the pavement, and the water comes right up to the edge of the trees. At night, with no moon, it's like driving into a tunnel that doesn't end. I found the car about 2 miles down the road. It was a pickup truck, dark-colored, pulled off onto what passed for a shoulder. The doors were open, the headlights were on, but there was nobody inside. I ran the plates. It came back to a man named Terrence Hebert, address in Maringouin. No outstanding warrants, no history. I got out and looked around. The truck's engine was still running, the keys were in the ignition, and there was a cell phone on the passenger seat. But no Terrence Hebert, no sign of anyone. I called it in and started searching. The road was empty in both directions. The swamp started about 20 feet from the pavement. Black water and cypress knees and the kind of darkness that swallows a flashlight beam after a few yards. I swept the tree line with my light, looking for any sign of movement. That's when I heard it. A voice, coming from the water. It was muffled, like someone was calling out from a long way off, or like there was something between me and them. I couldn't make out the words. It was just sound, rising and falling, with a rhythm that sounded like someone saying help over and over again. Louisiana State Police, I called out. If you can hear me, stay where you are. I'm coming to you. The voice didn't change. Same muffled sound, same rhythm. Help. Help! Help! I headed into the water. I didn't have waders, so I was soaked up to my thighs within the first few steps. The bottom was soft mud that sucked at my boots with every step, and the water was warm, almost body temperature, which made it somehow worse. I kept my flashlight up and my eyes on the direction the voice was coming from. The trees closed in around me. Cypress trunks, some of them 6 feet across, rising out of the water like pillars holding up the dark. Spanish moss hanging down, brushing my face and shoulders. The voice kept calling, but it didn't seem to be getting any closer. No matter how far I walked, it stayed the same distance away, always just out of reach. I stopped. Something was wrong. I'd been walking for at least 5 minutes, and by now I should have been able to see whoever was calling for help. I should have been on top of them. But the voice was still distant, still muffled, still coming from somewhere ahead of me in the dark. "Hello?" I called out. "Can you hear me? Tell me your name." The voice stopped, just like that. 1 second it was there, and the next it was gone. The swamp went silent. No frogs, no insects, nothing. Just me standing in chest-deep water in the middle of the Atchafalaya Basin, listening to my own heartbeat. And then it started again. But this time it was behind me. Same voice. Same muffled cry. Help! 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 But now it was coming from the direction I'd just walked from, back toward the road. I turned around and started moving that way, and the voice moved with me, staying just ahead of me, leading me back the way I'd come. I won't say I wasn't scared, I was. There's something about being alone in the dark, in the water with a voice that's always just out of reach. It does something to your mind. You start to think things that don't make sense. You start to see movement in the shadows where there's nothing moving. You start to feel like the swamp itself is watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake. I made it back to the road. The truck was still there, headlights still on, engine still running. But now there was someone standing next to it. A woman. She was standing by the driver's side door, looking into the swamp, looking at me. She was wearing a uniform. EMS, I realized, the dark blue of a paramedic. She must have been dispatched to the same call. "Over here," I called out. "I'm coming out of the water. There's someone in the swamp, but I can't locate them." The woman didn't move. Didn't react at all. Just stood there, staring at me. I climbed up onto the road, water streaming off me, boots squelching on the asphalt. As I got closer, I could see her face. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled back and an expression I couldn't read. She was pale, even in the red glow of the truck's taillights. Too pale. "Ma'am," I said, "are you all right?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, and she said very quietly, "He's not in the water. He never was." "What do you mean?" There was a voice. I heard someone calling for help. She shook her head. "That's not him. That's something else. It's been here a long time. It calls people in, and they don't come out." I stared at her. "Who are you? What are you talking about?" But she just turned and looked back at the swamp. Her lips were moving like she was saying something, but I couldn't hear the words. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. She wasn't casting a shadow. The truck's headlights were throwing light everywhere, casting shadows from every tree and rock and blade of grass, but the woman didn't have one. She was standing right in the light, and there was nothing behind her but empty pavement. I took a step back. My hand went to my weapon, not because I thought I could shoot whatever I was looking at, but because it was instinct, because it was the only thing I knew how to do. The woman looked at me again. Her expression was sad now, tired. "Don't go back in the water," she said. "No matter what you hear, don't go back in." And then she was gone. Not walked away, not faded out, just gone. One second she was there, and the next I was standing alone on the road next to an empty truck, staring at the place where she'd been. I stood there for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. The voice in the swamp had stopped. The night was quiet again, just the sound of the truck's engine and the water lapping at the edge of the road. I could feel my heart pounding, could feel sweat mixing with the swamp water on my face and neck. I got on my radio. Dispatch, 227. I'm at the scene on Parish Road 77. I've located an abandoned vehicle, but no victim. Requesting additional units and a search team. Copy that, 227. Was there an EMS unit dispatched to your location? Negative. I got no other units on that call. Why do you ask? I paused, not sure how to answer. I thought I saw a paramedic, but I must have been mistaken. Just send the search team. 20 minutes later, backup arrived. 2 deputies from the sheriff's office and a fire and rescue team with a boat. We searched that swamp until dawn, every inch of it within a half-mile radius of the abandoned truck. We found nothing. No body, no clothing, no sign that anyone had ever been in the water. Terrence Habert was never found. His truck was towed, his family was notified, and the case was classified as a missing person. The cell phone on his passenger seat had a single outgoing call on it. The 911 call, placed at 2:27 in the morning. The call lasted 43 seconds before it cut out. There were no other calls, no texts, no clues to what had happened or why he'd stopped on that road in the middle of the night. I wrote up my report. I kept it factual, found the vehicle, searched the area, no victim located. I didn't mention the voice in the swamp that stayed always out of reach. I didn't mention the woman with no shadow who appeared and disappeared on an empty road. I didn't know how to put things like that in an official report, and I wasn't sure anyone would believe me if I did. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. About the voice that led me into the water and then circled around behind me. About the woman who said, "He's not in the water. He never was." About her warning not to go back in, no matter what I heard. A week later, I went back to Parish Road 77. I'm not sure why. I just felt like I needed to see it again, needed to understand. I went during the day this time. The road looked different in the sunlight, just a cracked strip of pavement running through the swamp. Trees pressing in on both sides, nothing sinister about it. I parked at the spot where Terrence Hibber's truck had been found and got out. The swamp was quiet. A few birds calling, a turtle sliding off a log into the water, but nothing else. I stood at the edge of the pavement and looked into the trees, trying to see where I'd walked that night, trying to trace my path. I couldn't find it. There was no gap in the trees, no clear path into the water. The swamp was a solid wall of cypress and tupelo, impenetrable. I didn't see how I could have walked into it at all, much less walked as far as I had. I was about to leave when I saw something caught in the brush at the edge of the road. A scrap of fabric, dark blue, hanging from a low branch. I walked over and pulled it free. It was a patch, the kind of patch you'd sew onto a uniform. It said Acadian Ambulance in white letters on a blue background with a star of life symbol above the words. I looked at the patch for a long time. Then I got back in my cruiser and drove to the Acadian Ambulance station in Baton Rouge. The supervisor there was a woman named Trudy Saucier. She was in her 50s, short and solid, with the kind of no-nonsense manner you see in people who've spent their careers dealing with emergencies. I showed her the patch and told her where I'd found it. "That's one of ours," she said. "Old design, though. We changed the patches about 10 years ago." "Where did you say you found this?" "Parish Road 77, out by the Atchafalaya Basin." She frowned. "We don't run calls out there. That's outside our service area. One of the volunteer squads covers that territory." I hesitated, then decided to push a little further. "I'm investigating a missing person case from last week." A man disappeared on that road. When I was searching for him, I thought I saw a paramedic. A woman, young, dark hair. But she wasn't on any of the dispatch logs. Trudy was quiet for a moment. Her face had changed. Something had shifted behind her eyes. What did she look like? I described her as best I could. Young, late 20s, pale, dark hair pulled back, wearing an Acadian ambulance uniform. Trudy sat down heavily in her chair. "Did she say anything to you?" "She told me not to go in the water. She said there was something in there that called people in, and they didn't come out." Trudy closed her eyes. The look on her face was one I recognized. I'd seen it on the faces of people who'd lost someone. People who'd been carrying grief for a long time. "Her name was Michelle," she said finally. "Michelle Landry. She worked for us about 15 years ago. Best paramedic I ever trained. Smart, dedicated, fearless. She'd go into situations that made other people hesitate. She didn't hesitate. She saved lives because of that." "What happened to her?" "She died. September of 2009. Responded to a call on Parish Road 77. Same call you got, almost exactly. 911 call from a cell phone. Someone saying there was a person in the water. Then the call cut out. She went in alone. Her partner stayed with the ambulance. He said he heard her calling out that she'd found someone, that she needed the stretcher. He went to get it, and when he came back, she was gone. They never found her body. I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck. And the person in the water? The one she said she'd found? There was no one. They searched for 3 days. No victim, no body, nothing. Just like your case. The 911 call came from a cell phone registered to a man who'd been dead for 6 years. I didn't know what to say to that. Trudy looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "I don't know what's out there. I don't know what she's become. But if you saw her, if she warned you not to go in the water, then you should listen." Michelle knew what was in that swamp. She learned the hard way. I went back to my station and pulled up the records on Michelle Landry's death. It was all there. The 911 call, the search, the missing paramedic. The case was still open, technically, but there hadn't been any activity on it in years. She was presumed drowned, body never recovered. But that wasn't what caught my attention. What caught my attention was the list of other disappearances on Parish Road 77. There were 6 of them, spanning almost 40 years. Different people, different circumstances, but always the same pattern. A 911 call reporting someone in the water, a voice calling for help, and then nothing. No victim, no body, no explanation. Just people who went into the swamp and never came out. And now Terrence Hebert made 7. I became a little obsessed with it after that. I spent my off hours researching Parish Road 77, talking to old-timers in the area, digging through archives at the parish library. I found stories going back 100 years, tales of people who'd heard voices in the Atchafalaya, who'd followed sounds into the water and gotten lost. Some of them drowned. Some of them were never found. And some of them, according to the old stories, came back different. Changed. Like the swamp had gotten into them and wouldn't let go. The Cajun people had a name for it, though nobody would tell me what it was. They just shook their heads and changed the subject when I asked. One old man, a shrimper who'd worked the basin for 60 years, told me, "You don't go into the water when it calls. You don't follow the voice. That voice belongs to something that doesn't want to be alone. It takes people to keep itself company. That's all it is. Loneliness, old and deep and patient." I asked him what it was, this thing in the water. He just shook his head. "Some places are old," he said. "Older than the people who live there. Older than their stories. This is one of those places. "Don't go back there, trooper. Don't listen to the voice." I didn't go back. I wanted to. Part of me felt like I needed to understand what was out there, needed to find answers. But I didn't. I thought about Michelle Landry, walking into that swamp to help someone and never coming out. I thought about her appearing on that road to warn me, still trying to save people even after she was dead. And I thought about what she'd said. "It's been here a long time. It calls people in, and they don't come out." I transferred to a different territory a few months later. Didn't tell anyone why. Just said I wanted a change. Wanted to be closer to my family in Lafayette. But the truth is, I couldn't work those roads anymore. Every time I drove past a bayou at night, I'd find myself listening. Waiting for the voice, waiting for the call. It's been 11 years now, and I still think about it. I think about Terrence Hebert and the 6 people before him who vanished on Parish Road 77. I think about Michelle Landry and whatever she became after she died. I think about the voice in the water, always calling, always out of reach, patient as the swamp itself. And I think about what might have happened if I'd kept walking that night. If I hadn't stopped, hadn't turned around, hadn't seen the woman with no shadow who told me not to go back in. Would I have just walked until the water closed over my head? Would I have become one of the disappeared? Another name on a list that nobody talks about? I don't know. I'll never know. But I know this. There are places in Louisiana that are old. Older than the state, older than the country, older than the people who first settled there. Places where the rules are different, where things live that don't live anywhere else. The Atchafalaya Basin is one of those places. Parish Road 77 is one of those places. If you ever find yourself on that road at night and you hear a voice calling from the water, don't go in. Don't follow the sound. Don't try to find the source. Just get back in your car and drive away. Because whatever's making that sound, it's not human. It hasn't been human for a long time, and once it gets you in the water, you won't be human either. I need to tell you one more thing. Something that happened last year that made me finally decide to share this story. I got a call from Trudy Saucier. I hadn't talked to her since that day at the ambulance station, but she'd kept my number. Her voice was shaking when she called. "I thought you should know," she said. "They're closing Parish Road 77. The parish council voted last week. They're going to let the swamp take it back." I asked why. She was quiet for a long time. "There was another one," she said finally. "Last month. A fisherman heading home late at night. His boat was found on the bank. His truck was parked at the end of the road, but he was gone. They searched for 4 days. Jesus. But that's not the worst part," she said. "One of the searchers, a young deputy, he said he saw someone in the water. A woman, he said. Young, dark hair. She told him not to go in. She said it takes people and doesn't give them back. She said she was trying to stop it, but it's too strong. It's always been too strong." I closed my eyes. Michelle. Trudy was crying now. I thought maybe when she died it would stop. I thought maybe she was the last one, and whatever's out there would leave, would find somewhere else to be. But it didn't stop. It's still calling. And she's still there, trying to warn people, trying to do her job. Even after everything, I didn't know what to say. There's nothing to say to something like that. The road is closed now. Barriers across both ends. Signs warning people to keep out. In a few years, the swamp will reclaim it. The asphalt will crack and crumble. The water will rise over the edges. The trees will close in until there's no sign a road was ever there. Maybe that will help. Maybe whatever's in the water will sleep again, will stop calling for a while. Or maybe it won't. Maybe it will find another way to reach people. Another road, another voice, another way to draw people in to keep itself company. That's what it wants after all. That's what the old man told me. It doesn't want to be alone. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why it chose that particular stretch of swamp to make its home, or why it needs to take people, or what it does with them once it has them. But I know it's real. I heard its voice. I felt its pull. And if it hadn't been for Michelle Landry, for the ghost of a paramedic who died trying to save someone who wasn't there, I would have walked right into its arms. That's my story. That's what happened on Parish Road 77 in September of 2014. I don't expect you to believe it. I'm not sure I believe it myself most days. But if you ever find yourself on a dark road in Louisiana and you hear a voice calling from the water, remember what I told you. Don't go in. Don't follow the sound. Just drive away and don't look back. And if you see a woman standing by the road, a young woman in a paramedic's uniform with dark hair and no shadow, listen to what she tells you. She's been there a long time, watching over that place. She's seen what it does to people, and she's trying to save you the only way she knows how. She's still trying to do her job, even now, even after everything. That's what I keep thinking about when I lie awake at night and the darkness presses in. That's the part I can't get out of my head. Michelle Landry died trying to save someone. She walked into that swamp alone, brave and dedicated and fearless, and something took her, something that doesn't want to be alone. But even after it took her, she didn't stop. She stayed on that road. She kept trying to warn people, to save them from what happened to her. She's been doing it for 15 years now, and she'll probably keep doing it forever, or until there's no one left to save. I think about the kind of person that takes, the kind of dedication, the kind of love. I think about my own job, my own dedication. 22 years as a state trooper, serving and protecting. I always thought that was important. I always thought that meant something. But Michelle Landry, she's still serving and protecting. She's still doing the work. Even death couldn't stop her. That's the standard. That's what it looks like when someone really means it. I retired from the state police last spring. My wife and I moved to a little place up in Natchitoches, far from the swamps, far from the water. I sleep better now. I don't listen for the voice anymore. But sometimes, when the wind is right and the night is quiet, I think I can hear it. Calling. Calling, help. Help, help. From somewhere far away. Somewhere that's both out in the world and inside my own head. And I think about Michelle, standing on that road, watching over Parish Road 77, trying to stop something that can't be stopped. And I hope, I pray, that she finds peace eventually. That whatever's holding her there lets her go. That she gets to move on to wherever people go when they're truly done with this world. But I don't think she will. I think she'll be there forever, as long as the water rises and the voice calls. Trying to save people from something that can't be fought. Because that's who she was, that's who she is. And the swamp, the old, patient, lonely swamp, will never let her stop. Some things stick with you. You work this job long enough. You see a lot of bad things, accidents, drownings, domestics that turn ugly, bodies in ditches, and most of them fade after a while. Your mind files them away somewhere you don't have to look at them every day. That's how you survive 20 years on the highway. You learn to let things go. But some things don't fade. Some things stay right up front, clear as the day they happened, and no matter how much time passes, they don't get any smaller. What I'm about to tell you is one of those things. My name is Rylan Arsenault. I was a Louisiana state trooper from 1998 to 2021, mostly working the parishes around Baton Rouge. I-10, I-12, Highway 190, Highway 61. Those were my roads. I knew every exit, every overpass, every spot where people went too fast and ended up in trouble. I thought I understood how things worked out there. I thought I'd seen everything the highway could throw at me. I was wrong. This started in October of 2017. I was working a day shift on Highway 61 north of Baton Rouge, up toward St. Francisville. It's a pretty stretch of road, 2 lanes most of the way, rolling through farm country and old plantation land. Traffic's usually light except for the weekends when people come up from New Orleans to tour the historic homes. I got a call from dispatch around 2 in the afternoon. A motorist had reported what looked like an accident on Highway 61 near the Audubon exit. A vehicle off the road, in the trees, with what might be a body nearby. I was about 10 minutes away, so I hit my lights and headed out. When I got to the location, there was nothing there. I pulled onto the shoulder at the spot the motorist had described and looked around. Trees, grass, a drainage ditch with some standing water in it. No vehicle, no body, no sign of any accident. I called dispatch to confirm the location. They gave me the same mile marker, same description. I walked the tree line for about 100 yards in each direction, looking for any sign that a vehicle had left the road. Nothing. The grass was undisturbed. The trees were intact. There were no tire tracks or broken branches or debris of any kind. I marked it as a false report and went back to my patrol. It happens sometimes. Someone sees something that looks like an accident but turns out to be construction equipment, or a deer carcass, or just a trick of the light. You check it out, find nothing, and move on. But the next day, I got the same call. Same location, same description. Vehicle off the road near the Audubon exit. Possible body in the trees. I went out again, and again I found nothing. No vehicle, no body, no evidence of any accident. I talked to dispatch about it. They said the calls had come from 2 different people on 2 different cell phones. Not a prank, not someone calling in the same thing twice. 2 separate motorists, 24 hours apart, both seeing something at the exact same spot that wasn't there when I arrived. I started paying closer attention to that stretch of road. Every time I drove past the Audubon exit, I'd slow down and look into the trees, looking for anything unusual. For about a week, I saw nothing. Just trees and grass, and the occasional deer watching me from the shadows. Then, on October 19th, I got another call. Same location, same description. And this time, when I arrived, there was something there. Not a crashed vehicle, not a body, but something. It was a piece of paper, lying in the grass at the edge of the tree line. White paper, letter-sized, folded in thirds like it had been in an envelope. It was wet from the dew, but otherwise undamaged. I picked it up and unfolded it. It was a Louisiana State Police accident report. Form 12, the standard report we use for traffic accidents. It was filled out in neat handwriting, every field completed, date, time, location, vehicles involved, parties involved, narrative description of the incident. The date on the report was October 19th, 2003, 14 years ago. To the day. I read through the report. It described a single vehicle accident on Highway 61 at the Audubon exit. A car had left the road at a high rate of speed, struck several trees, and come to rest about 30 feet off the pavement. The driver had been pronounced dead at the scene. The cause of the accident was listed as excessive speed and failure to negotiate a curve. The driver's name was Michael Thibodeau, age 34, address in Baker. I looked up at the trees. This was where it had happened. This was the spot. Someone, or something, had left this report here for me to find. But why? And how? Reports like this were kept in archives, not lying around in fields. And the date, October 19th, 2003, why was that significant? What was I supposed to understand? I bagged the report and took it back to the station. I ran the name Michael Thibodeau through the system and found the original accident report from 2003. It matched. Every detail, the location, the time, the description of the accident, the cause of death, it was all identical to the report I'd found in the field. Someone had made a copy of a 14-year-old accident report and left it at the scene of the accident for me to find. That was the only explanation that made sense. But who would do that? And why? I started digging into the case. Michael Thibodeau had been driving home from work on the night of October 19, 2003. He'd lost control of his vehicle on a curve, left the road, and hit a tree. He'd been killed instantly. No other vehicles involved, no witnesses, no suspicious circumstances, just a tragic accident on a dark stretch of highway. The case had been closed for 14 years. There was no reason for anyone to be revisiting it, no reason for someone to make a copy of the report and leave it for me to find. Unless there was something wrong with the original investigation, unless someone was trying to tell me something. I went to the parish archives and pulled the physical file on the Thibodeau accident. It was thin, just the accident report, a few photographs, and a death certificate. I looked at the photographs first. They showed a car wrapped around a tree, the front end crushed, the windshield shattered. The driver was still in the vehicle in some of the photos, slumped over the steering wheel. It was hard to look at. But something in the photos bothered me. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. It was just a feeling, a sense that something was off. I looked at them again, more carefully this time, and then I saw it. The skid marks. In the photos, there were skid marks on the road leading up to the point where the vehicle left the pavement. Long, dark marks, the kind you get when someone slams on the brakes. But the accident report said the cause was excessive speed and failure to negotiate a curve. If Thibodeau had been going too fast to make the curve, he wouldn't have had time to brake. The skid marks didn't fit the official narrative. I called the trooper who'd worked the original case. His name was Warren Gillory, and he'd retired in 2010. It took me a few days to track down his number. He was living in Texas now, out near Houston. But when I finally reached him, he was willing to talk. "I remember that accident," he said when I told him why I was calling. "I remember all of them, the bad ones stay with you." I asked him about the skid marks. He was quiet for a moment. "I noticed those too," he said finally. "But the investigator from the insurance company said they were from a previous accident, unrelated to Thibodeau. The road crew hadn't gotten around to removing them yet. That's what I put in my notes. Did you believe that?" Another pause. I wanted to. It was late. I was tired, and the insurance investigator seemed to know what he was talking about. But looking back, no. Those marks were fresh. The rubber was still black. If they'd been from a previous accident, they would have been faded, washed out by rain and traffic. They weren't. So, what do you think happened? I don't know. But I've thought about it over the years. The way the car hit the tree, the way the skid marks lined up. It looked to me like he was trying to avoid something. Something in the road. He saw it, he hit the brakes, he swerved, and he lost control. What was he trying to avoid? I don't know. There was nothing there when I arrived. No debris, no animal, nothing. Just an empty road and a dead man in a wrecked car. I thanked him and hung up. Then I started looking at the accident from a different angle. If Thibodeau had been trying to avoid something in the road, what could it have been? An animal was possible. Deer were common in that area, but there was no blood, no fur, no sign of impact. A person was possible too, but there were no witnesses, no reports of anyone on the road that night. But what if there had been another vehicle? I went back to the report. There was no mention of another vehicle, no paint transfer on Thibodeau's car, No evidence of any kind that anyone else had been involved. But that didn't mean anything. If another driver had caused the accident and then fled the scene, there might not be any evidence. There might be nothing except the skid marks and the angle of impact. I started looking at other accidents on that stretch of Highway 61. I went back 10 years, then 20, pulling files on every accident that had occurred within a mile of the Autobahn exit. Most of them were routine. Fender benders, single-vehicle accidents, nothing unusual. But 3 of them caught my attention. August 14th, 1997. A woman named Renee Blanchard lost control of her car and went off the road near the Autobahn exit. She survived but was badly injured. The cause was listed as driver inattention. March 6, 2008. A man named Thomas Verrett lost control of his truck and went off the road near the Autobahn exit. He was killed instantly. The cause was listed as excessive speed. December 22, 2014. A woman named Grace Nguyen lost control of her car and went off the road near the Autobahn exit. She was killed instantly. The cause was listed as failure to negotiate a curve. 4 accidents over 20 years, all at the same location, all single vehicle, all attributed to driver error. That wasn't unusual by itself. Some spots are just dangerous. Some curves catch people by surprise. But when I looked at the details of the cases, I found something strange. All 4 accidents had happened on the 19th of the month, August 19th, 1997. Not August 14th, like the original report said. When I checked the file, someone had changed the date by hand, crossing out the 14 and writing 19. The original was still visible underneath. March 19th, 2008, not March 6th. Same thing. The date had been altered in the file. December 19th, 2014. Not December 22nd. Altered, and October 19th, 2003. Michael Thibodeau. The date that matched the report I'd found in the field. Someone had changed the dates in the files. Someone had tried to hide the fact that all 4 accidents had happened on the same day of the month. But they'd missed one. Or maybe they'd left it as a clue. A way of pointing someone towards the truth. I sat at my desk for a long time, trying to understand what I was looking at. 4 fatal or near-fatal accidents, all at the same location, all on the 19th of the month, and someone had altered the records to hide the pattern. Why? What happened on the 19th that caused people to crash at that spot? And who had changed the dates? I called the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Highways and asked to speak to someone about the Autobahn exit. They put me through to a highway technician named Zeke Castile, who'd worked that district for almost 30 years. "I know that spot," he said when I told him what I was looking at. "I've been saying for years there's something wrong with it. The curve isn't posted right, the speed limit's too high for the angle of the turn. But every time I put in a work order to change it, it gets rejected. Someone higher up keeps shutting it down. Why?" He hesitated. "I don't know. I've got my theories, but they're just theories. Tell me, there's a family that owns most of the land around that exit. Old money, old Louisiana. They've got connections all over the state, people in government, people in the department. A few years back, one of their kids was involved in an accident on that curve. He was drag racing, going way too fast, and he forced another car off the road. The other driver died. Kid got off with a slap on the wrist. His family made sure of that. I always figured maybe they didn't want anyone looking too closely at that stretch of road, asking questions about why it's so dangerous. So they keep the speed limit the same, keep the signage the same, and when people crash there, it gets written off as driver error. Do you know the family's name?" Castile was quiet for a moment. "Thibodeau," he said finally. The family's name is Thibodeau. I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck. Thibodeau. The same name as the man who'd died there in 2003. I went back to the file on Michael Thibodeau. In his personal information, I found an emergency contact. A brother named David Thibodeau. Same last name, different address. I ran David through the system and found nothing. No criminal record, no traffic violations, not even a parking ticket. Clean as a whistle. But when I looked at property records, I found plenty. David Thibodeau owned 300 acres around the Audubon exit, land that had been in his family for 4 generations. He was also on the board of the St. Francisville Chamber of Commerce and a major donor to local politicians. The kind of man who could make problems go away if he wanted to. I called Warren Guyery again and asked him about the insurance investigator who'd told him the skid marks were from a previous accident. He couldn't remember the man's name, but he remembered who had recommended him. David Thibodeau, the victim's brother. He came to the scene, Guyery said. He was very upset, naturally. When I mentioned the skid marks, he said he knew someone who could take a look, give an expert opinion. It seemed like he was just trying to help, make sure his brother's accident was investigated properly. But now that you mention it, it was a little strange. He showed up awfully fast, almost like he'd been expecting it. I hung up the phone and sat in my cruiser for a long time, thinking. A man dies in an accident on his family's property. His brother shows up at the scene almost immediately, brings in an investigator to explain away evidence that doesn't fit the narrative, and then somehow arranges for the records to be altered to hide a pattern of similar accidents at the same location. Why? What was David Thibodeau hiding? I drove out to the Audubon exit the next day. It was a cool morning, overcast, the kind of weather that makes Louisiana look like somewhere else entirely. I parked on the shoulder at the spot where Michael Thibodeau's car had left the road and looked around. The curve was sharper than I'd realized, and it came up faster than the signage suggested. If you were going the speed limit, 60 miles an hour, you'd have to brake hard to make it. At night, in the dark, with no warning, you might not make it at all. But the curve wasn't the only problem. On the right side of the road, just before the turn, there was a gap in the trees. An access road leading onto the Thibodeau property. It was unpaved, barely visible from the highway unless you were looking for it, and it pointed directly at the spot where cars kept leaving the road. I stood there for a while, trying to imagine what it would look like at night. The headlights of a car coming around the curve. The dark access road opening up on the right, and something emerging from that road, pulling out onto the highway without looking, forcing the oncoming driver to brake hard and swerve. Was that what had happened? Had someone been pulling out of that access road at night, causing accidents and then disappearing before the police arrived? Had Michael Thibodeau's own brother been responsible for his death? It was a theory, just a theory, no evidence to support it. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The altered dates, the pressure to keep the speed limit unchanged, the insurance investigator who'd explained away the skid marks. It all pointed to someone who was trying to hide something. Someone who knew there was a pattern and didn't want anyone else to see it. I needed proof. I needed something that would show what had really happened on those nights. I went back to the department and requested the traffic camera footage for the Audubon exit. There was only one camera, mounted at the intersection about a quarter-mile north of the curve. It didn't cover the accident site directly, but it might have captured vehicles entering and exiting the area on the nights of the accidents. The footage only went back 2 years. Anything older had been purged, but it was enough to show me what I needed to see. On the night of December 19, 2014, about 20 minutes before Grace and Gwen's accident, a dark-colored truck had exited the Thibodeau access road and headed south toward the curve. 5 minutes after the accident was reported, The same truck came back the other way, heading north, and turned back onto the access road. The plate wasn't visible, but the truck was distinctive. An older model, big and square with what looked like fog lights mounted on the roof. I showed the footage to Zeke Castile and asked if he recognized the vehicle. "That's David Thibodeau's truck," he said immediately. "I've seen it 100 times on that road. He drives it whenever he's checking his property lines. I had David Thibodeau's vehicle leaving his property minutes before an accident and returning minutes after. It wasn't proof that he'd caused the accident, but it was enough to justify a deeper investigation." I took everything I had to my captain. The accident reports, the altered dates, the traffic footage, the connection to the Thibodeau family. I laid it all out and asked for authorization to bring David Thibodeau in for questioning. My captain listened. He looked at the evidence. And then he told me to drop it. "There's nothing here," he said. "Coincidences and speculation. Even if Thibodeau's truck was on the road that night, that doesn't mean he caused the accident. The woman could have lost control for any number of reasons. You've got no witnesses, no physical evidence, no case. The dates were altered in the files. Someone is covering up a pattern of accidents. You don't know that. Old files get damaged, pages get misfiled, mistakes get made. That's not evidence of a cover-up." He looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "I know you want this to mean something, Rylan, but sometimes an accident is just an accident. Leave it alone." I left his office knowing I wasn't going to leave it alone. I couldn't. Someone had left that accident report in the field for me to find. Someone had wanted me to see the pattern, to understand what was happening at the Audubon exit. I wasn't going to ignore that. I wasn't going to let those people, Michael Thibodeau, Renee Blanchard, Thomas Verrett, Grace Nguyen, be forgotten. But I didn't know what else to do. Without authorization from my superiors, I couldn't compel anyone to talk to me. I couldn't subpoena records, couldn't bring anyone in for questioning. All I could do was wait and watch and hope that something would break loose. Something did. A month later, on November 19th, there was another accident at the Audubon exit. I wasn't on duty that night. I was home, asleep, when my phone rang. It was Zeke Castile. "There's been another one," he said. "Same spot. Driver lost control, went off the road, hit a tree. He's alive, but just barely. They're taking him to Our Lady of the Lake." I got dressed and drove to the hospital. The victim was in surgery. They wouldn't tell me his name or his condition, but I waited. I waited all night and into the morning, drinking coffee from the vending machine and watching the doors. Finally, around 6 in the morning, a doctor came out and told me the victim was stable but critical. His name was James Fontenot, age 27. He'd been driving home from Baton Rouge when he'd lost control of his car on a curve. He couldn't remember what had happened. There was a gap in his memory from a few minutes before the crash to when he woke up in the ambulance. I asked if I could talk to him. The doctor said not yet, maybe in a few days when he was stronger. I went home and tried to sleep. I couldn't. I kept thinking about James Fontenot lying in that hospital bed, another victim of the Audubon exit, another name on a list that nobody seemed to want to look at. That afternoon, I got a call from dispatch. A motorist had reported something in the field at the Audubon exit. Something that looked like a piece of paper. I drove out there. It was right where I'd found the other report, same spot, same position in the grass. I picked it up and unfolded it. It was an accident report, filled out in neat handwriting, every field complete. The date was November 19th, 2017. Yesterday's date. The victim was James Fontenot. The location was Highway 61 at the Audubon exit. But the cause of the accident wasn't driver error. The cause was listed as follows. Driver forced off road by second vehicle emerging from private access road without warning. Second vehicle fled scene. I stared at the report. It was impossible. The accident had happened less than 12 hours ago. There was no way an official report could have been filed already, much less copied and left in a field. And the cause of the accident, that wasn't what anyone had said. Everyone thought Fontenot had lost control on his own. Nobody had mentioned a second vehicle. But someone knew. Someone who'd been leaving these reports for me to find. Someone who knew what was really happening at the Autobahn exit and wanted me to see it. I went back to the hospital. James Fontenot was awake now, groggy but lucid. I showed him my badge and asked if he could tell me what he remembered about the accident. "I don't know," he said. "I was coming around that curve and then there was something in front of me. Headlights, I think, but wrong. They were too close, like someone was pulling out right in front of me. I hit the brakes and tried to go around, and then nothing. I woke up here. Did you see the other vehicle? Can you describe it?" He shook his head. "It happened too fast. I just remember the lights. They were high up, like a truck. And there might have been something on top, like extra lights, but I'm not sure. Fog lights. A truck with fog lights mounted on the roof. I went to David Thibodeau's house. It was a big place, plantation style, set back from the road behind an iron gate. I rang the bell at the gate and waited. After a few minutes, a voice came through the intercom. "Can I help you?" "Louisiana State Police. I'd like to speak to David Thibodeau." A pause. "What's this about?" "There was an accident on Highway 61 last night near the Autobahn exit. I'm following up on some leads." Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Thibodeau isn't available right now. If you'd like to leave your card, he can call you when he's free." I left my card. Thibodeau didn't call. I didn't expect him to. I went back to my captain and told him about the accident report I'd found in the field. I told him about James Fontenot's memory of headlights pulling out in front of him. I told him I wanted to bring David Thibodeau in for questioning. My captain listened, and then he told me the same thing he'd told me before. "Drop it. There's no case. Leave it alone." But this time, he added something else. "I've been getting calls, Rylan, from people in Baton Rouge. People who are concerned about the direction of this investigation. They think you're wasting department resources on a personal vendetta. They think you should be focusing on real crimes, not chasing ghosts. Is that what they think? That's what they think. And I'm inclined to agree with them. So I'm going to say this once, and I want you to hear me. Leave this alone. Whatever you think is happening at that exit, you're wrong. There's nothing there. Let it go." I looked at him for a long moment. He didn't look away. "Who called you?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Was it Thibodeau?" Still no answer, but I could see it in his face. I could see that he knew exactly what I was talking about, and he'd made his choice about which side he was on. I left his office. I sat in my cruiser in the parking lot for a long time, trying to figure out what to do. David Thibodeau was killing people. He was pulling out of that access road at night, forcing drivers off the road, and then vanishing before anyone could see him. He'd been doing it for years, maybe decades, and he'd gotten away with it because he had money and connections and because people were afraid of him. 4 people were dead because of him. 4 people and counting, because he wasn't going to stop. He liked it too much. He was going to keep doing it until someone stopped him. But I couldn't stop him, not through official channels, not when my own captain was telling me to let it go, not when people in Baton Rouge were making calls to protect him. So I decided to stop him another way. On the night of December 19th, I drove to the Autobahn exit. It was late, after midnight, and the highway was empty. I parked in the trees on the opposite side of the road from the Thibodeau access road, killed my lights, and waited. I waited for 3 hours. I was about to give up when I saw headlights coming from the south, moving fast. A car, probably doing 70 or 75, heading north toward the curve. And then I saw the other lights. From the access road. A truck, dark-colored, with fog lights on the roof, pulling out onto the highway right in the path of the oncoming car. I hit my lights and siren and pulled onto the road. The truck's headlights swung toward me, and for just a second I saw the driver's face in my spotlight. David Thibodeau. Eyes wide, mouth open. Then he was gone. He reversed back up the access road and disappeared into the trees. The car that had been coming around the curve braked hard and pulled onto the shoulder, the driver probably wondering what the hell was going on. I didn't pursue Thibodeau. I knew I wouldn't catch him. He knew those woods better than I ever would, and by the time I got turned around, he'd be long gone. But it didn't matter. I had him. I'd seen him pulling out in front of that car. I knew what he was doing. The next morning, I went back to my captain. I told him what I'd seen. I told him David Thibodeau was pulling out in front of cars at night, forcing them off the road, that I'd witnessed it with my own eyes. My captain listened, and then he asked me why I'd been parked on the side of the road at midnight without authorization, conducting an unauthorized surveillance operation on a private citizen. I didn't have an answer for that. He suspended me. 2 weeks without pay, pending an internal investigation. He said I'd overstepped my authority, that I'd jeopardized the department's relationship with an important member of the community. David Thibodeau filed a harassment complaint against me. He said I'd been following him, surveilling him, that I was obsessed and dangerous. The complaint went into my file. When I came back from suspension, I was transferred to a different district. Traffic patrol in New Orleans, far away from Highway 61 and the Audubon exit. My captain made it clear that if I went anywhere near St. Francisville, I'd be fired. I never went back. I finished out my career working traffic in New Orleans, counting down the days until retirement. I never found out what happened at the Audubon exit after I left. I never found out if there were more accidents, more deaths, more accident reports left in fields for someone else to find. But I still have the reports, the ones I found, the ones that were left for me. I've kept them all these years, waiting for a time when I could do something with them, tell someone what happened, make someone listen. Maybe this is that time. Maybe you're that someone. Here's what I know. There's a stretch of Highway 61 north of Baton Rouge, near the Audubon exit, where people keep dying. 4 people. 5, if you count James Fontenot, over the course of 20 years, all at the same location, all on the 19th of the month. Someone has altered the records to hide the pattern. Someone has pressured the authorities to look the other way, and someone is still out there, still pulling out of that access road at night, still forcing drivers off the road. His name is David Thibodeau. He's protected by money and power and fear. He's killed at least 4 people, maybe more, and he's gotten away with it. And someone, I don't know who, I don't know how, has been trying to tell people about it. Leaving accident reports in fields, pointing toward the truth, waiting for someone to see, to understand, to do something. Maybe it's the victims, maybe it's whatever's left of them, trying to make sure their stories aren't forgotten. Maybe it's Michael Thibodeau himself, David's own brother, reaching out from wherever he is to expose what really happened to him. I don't know. I don't know who's leaving the reports or how they know what they know. I just know that they're real, and the pattern is real, and the man responsible is still out there. So that's my story. That's what happened to me on Highway 61 in the fall of 2017. I couldn't stop David Thibodeau. I couldn't bring him to justice, but I can tell you about him. I can tell you what he's done. And maybe, if enough people know, something will change. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe he's too powerful, too connected, too careful. Maybe he'll keep doing what he's doing until he's dead, and then someone else will take his place, and the accidents will keep happening, and the records will keep getting altered, and nobody will ever do anything about it. But at least you'll know. At least someone will know the truth, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can do. I found one more report. It was last year, almost exactly 4 years after my suspension. I was retired by then, living in Slidell, not thinking much about Highway 61 or the Audubon exit or any of it. I'd made my peace with the fact that I couldn't change what was happening there. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility anymore. Then I got a package in the mail. No return address, no note. Just a single piece of paper folded in thirds. An accident report. Highway 61 at the Audubon exit. October 19th, 2021. The victim was David Thibodeau. Single vehicle accident, lost control of his truck, left the road and hit a tree. Pronounced dead at the scene. The cause of death was listed as follows. Driver forced off road by second vehicle emerging from opposite lane. Second vehicle not located. I sat there for a long time, looking at the report. David Thibodeau was dead. Killed in an accident at the same location where he'd killed so many others, on the same day of the month, in the same way. Forced off the road by someone else, just like his brother, just like all the others. Justice? Karma? Coincidence? I don't know. I'll never know. But I'll tell you one thing. Whoever's been leaving those reports, whoever's been trying to tell people about the Audubon exit, they didn't stop when I left. They didn't stop when Thibodeau died. They're still out there, still watching, still waiting for someone to see the pattern and understand. And maybe, now that Thibodeau is gone, the accidents will stop. Maybe whoever's been leaving the reports will rest, will move on, will let the highway be what it's supposed to be. Just a road, just asphalt and paint, not a graveyard. Or maybe not. Maybe there are other secrets out there, other patterns hidden in the records. Maybe the reports will keep appearing, one by one, pointing toward things that no one wants to see. If they do, I hope someone listens. I hope someone follows where they lead, because that's all the dead can do when it comes down to it. Point, whisper, leave signs in fields and hope that someone pays attention. The rest is up to us. The rest is always up to us. I've driven more miles on Louisiana highways than I can count. I started with the state police in '99 and worked until last year. 23 years of night shifts, day shifts, holiday shifts, hurricane evacuations, you name it. I've seen overturned semis, multi-car pileups, bodies on the pavement. I've seen people at their worst and at their best. I've seen things that made me want to quit and things that made me proud to wear the badge. But I've never seen anything like what happened in January of 2020. 2020. My name is Damon Bro. I worked the I-10 corridor between Lake Charles and Lafayette for most of my career. That stretch of interstate that runs through nothing but swamp and sugarcane for 80 miles. It's a lonely road at night. Traffic thins out after 10 o'clock, and by midnight you can go 20 minutes without seeing another car. Just you and the road and the darkness pressing in on all sides. That's the road where I saw the truck. It was a Wednesday night, January 22nd, I remember, because it was my daughter's birthday, and I'd promised to call her at midnight when she turned 18. I was working the late shift, 10 to 6, and the weather was bad. Fog had rolled in from the Gulf around 8 o'clock, thick and wet, the kind that reduces visibility to almost nothing. I was crawling along at about 40 miles an hour, watching the taillights of cars ahead of me and hoping nobody did anything stupid. Around 11, I got a call from dispatch. A trucker had reported a disabled vehicle on the shoulder near mile marker 64, about 10 miles west of my position. No hazards on, no lights of any kind, just sitting there in the fog. The trucker was worried someone might hit it. I headed that way. The fog was getting worse. I could barely see 2 car lengths ahead, so it took me almost 20 minutes to cover the 10 miles. When I got to mile marker 64, I slowed down and swept the shoulder with my spotlight. Nothing. No vehicle, no debris. Nothing except wet asphalt and the dim shapes of cypress trees beyond the guardrail. I drove another mile past the location, then turned around and came back. Still nothing. I called dispatch and reported the vehicle as GOA, gone on arrival, and went back to my patrol. About 30 minutes later, I got another call. Different trucker, same report. Disabled vehicle on the shoulder, no lights, no hazards, this time at mile marker 58. 6 miles east of where the first one had been reported. I headed that way and found nothing. Empty shoulder, no vehicle, no sign that anything had been there. I was starting to think we had a prankster on our hands, someone calling in false reports to waste police time. When I saw it, it was just after midnight. I was eastbound on I-10, passing mile marker 61, when my headlights caught something on the shoulder ahead. A truck, big, dark-colored, old-looking. It was just sitting there in the fog, no lights on, no movement inside, no license plate on the back. I slowed down and pulled up behind it. I hit my spotlight and lit up the rear of the vehicle. It was a pickup truck, maybe 20 or 30 years old, dark blue or black, hard to tell in the fog. The bed was empty, the windows were dark, and there was no plate, not a temporary tag, not a dealer plate, nothing. Just a bare bumper where the plate should have been. I called it in and got out of my cruiser. The fog was thick enough that I could barely see the front of the truck from where I was standing. The air was cold and wet, that particular Louisiana cold that gets into your bones. I approached the driver's side window with my flashlight up. The truck was empty. No driver, no passengers, no keys in the ignition. The interior was clean. No trash, no personal items, nothing. Just bench seats and a bare dashboard and the smell of something I couldn't quite identify. Something old, musty, like a house that had been closed up for a long time. I tried the door. It was locked. All the doors were locked and the windows were rolled up tight. I walked around the truck, looking for any indication of who it belonged to or where it had come from. There was no VIN plate on the dashboard, no registration sticker on the windshield, no bumper stickers or identifying marks of any kind. It was like someone had taken a truck and erased every trace of its history. I was about to call for a tow when I noticed something else. The tires. They were wet, which made sense. Everything was wet in that fog, but they were wet in a way that didn't make sense. The wetness was on top of a layer of dust, like the truck had been sitting somewhere dry for a long time and had only recently been moved into the rain. But if that were true, where had it come from? How had it gotten onto the highway without anyone seeing it? I called for a tow truck and waited. The fog was getting thicker. I could barely see the guardrail now, and the temperature was dropping. I sat in my cruiser with the heater running, watching the truck in my rearview mirror. That's when I saw the headlights. They came out of the fog behind me, dim at first, then brighter, moving slowly. Another vehicle, approaching from the west. I watched it come closer and closer, and then it pulled off onto the shoulder right behind my cruiser. It was the truck. The same truck. Dark blue or black, old, no plate, sitting right behind me like it had been there all along. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw it. Then I looked through my windshield at the shoulder ahead. The truck was still there too. Both of them, one ahead of me and one behind me, identical, sitting in the fog like bookends. I got out of my cruiser. I walked to the truck behind me first. It was the same as the other one, empty cab, locked doors, no identifying marks. I walked to the truck ahead. Same thing. 2 identical trucks, one ahead and one behind, with my cruiser in the middle. I stood there in the fog, trying to understand what I was looking at. 2 trucks didn't make sense. One had been there when I arrived, and the other had driven up behind me. But they were identical. Not similar, identical. And neither of them had plates or any way to tell them apart. I called dispatch. I told them what I was seeing, and I could tell from the tone of the dispatcher's voice that she thought I was losing it. I didn't blame her. I wasn't sure I wasn't losing it. She said she'd send another unit, but it would be at least 40 minutes. The fog was slowing everything down. I went back to my cruiser to wait. I sat there watching both trucks, one in my rear view and one through the windshield. Neither of them moved. Neither of them did anything. They just sat there in the fog, dark and silent. After about 10 minutes, headlights appeared ahead of me. Another vehicle coming from the east. I watched it approach, expecting it to slow down when it saw my lights, but it didn't. It came straight toward me, moving fast, too fast for the conditions, and for a second I thought it was going to hit the truck ahead of me. It didn't. It went right past, not around the truck but through it, like the truck wasn't even there. I saw the headlights pass through the space where the truck was sitting, and then the vehicle was gone. Taillights disappearing into the fog behind me. I got out of my cruiser again. The truck ahead of me was gone. The shoulder was empty, just wet pavement and fog. But the truck behind me was still there, still sitting on the shoulder, still dark and silent and identical to the one that had just vanished. I walked back to the remaining truck. I touched the hood. It was cold, no engine heat at all. I looked in the windows again. Still empty, still locked, still no signs of who it belonged to or where it had come from. I was standing there trying to figure out what to do when I heard the sound. It was an engine, low and rough, like a truck idling somewhere nearby. But I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It seemed to be all around me, behind me, ahead of me, off in the trees on both sides of the highway. Just this low, constant rumble, barely audible over the sound of my own cruiser's engine. I turned in a circle, trying to locate the source. The fog was too thick. I couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. But the sound kept going, that low rumble, and it seemed to be getting closer. Then headlights appeared, not on the road, off to my right, in the trees beyond the guardrail. 2 pale circles of light, maybe 50 yards away, moving slowly through the swamp. I watched them. They weren't moving toward the highway, they were moving parallel to it, heading east, the same direction I'd been going. They stayed at the same distance, the same height, the same brightness, like a truck driving through the swamp on a road that didn't exist. I knew those woods. I'd patrolled this stretch of highway for 15 years. There were no roads out there, just swamp and cypress and water. Nothing could drive through that. Nothing with wheels, anyway. The lights kept moving. I watched them until they disappeared into the fog, heading east, still parallel to the highway. Then the engine sound faded, and I was alone on the shoulder again. The truck behind me was gone. I don't mean it had driven away. I mean it was gone. Vanished, like the one ahead of me had vanished. 1 second it was there, and the next the shoulder was empty. I was standing alone on the highway with my cruiser, and there was nothing else. No trucks, no headlights, no engine sounds. Just me and the fog and the darkness. I got back in my cruiser. My hands were shaking. I've been a trooper for over 20 years, and I've never had my hands shake on a call before. But they were shaking then. I drove east toward the lights I'd seen in the swamp. I don't know why. I should have gone the other way, should have gotten as far from that stretch of highway as I could, but something made me follow them. I needed to know what they were. I needed to understand. I drove for about 3 miles. The fog was starting to thin a little. I could see maybe 50 yards now, and I was starting to think I'd imagined the whole thing when I saw the truck again. It was in the middle of the highway, both lanes, straddling the center line, facing me. Headlights on this time, bright and white, pointed straight at my windshield. I hit my brakes and stopped about 100 feet away. The truck just sat there, engine running, headlights blazing. I couldn't see through the glare to see if anyone was inside. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The truck didn't move, didn't turn, didn't do anything. Just sat there in the middle of the road, blocking both lanes, like it was waiting for me. I reached for my radio to call it in, and that's when the truck's engine revved. Loud, aggressive, the kind of sound a vehicle makes when someone floors the accelerator. But it didn't move. The engine screamed, but the truck stayed exactly where it was. Then the headlights went out. Not dimmed, out. 1 second they were blinding me, and the next there was nothing but darkness and fog. The engine sound stopped too. Everything stopped. I turned on my spotlight and pointed it at the spot where the truck had been. The road was empty. There was nothing there. No truck, no tire marks, no sign that anything had ever been there. I sat in my cruiser for a long time after that. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to explain what I'd seen. The trucks appearing and disappearing. The headlights in the swamp. The engine that revved but didn't move. None of it made sense. None of it was possible. Eventually, I drove back to the original location, mile marker 64, where the first trucker had reported the disabled vehicle. I wanted to see if there was anything there, any evidence that could help me understand what was happening. There was, but it wasn't what I expected. The truck was there. The same dark-colored truck, old, no plates, but this time it wasn't on the shoulder. It was in the ditch, on its side, like it had gone off the road and rolled. The hood was crumpled, the windshield was shattered, and there was glass and debris scattered across the pavement. I called it in and got out of my cruiser. I approached the truck carefully, expecting to find a driver inside. Hurt, maybe dead, needing help. The cab was empty. No driver, no blood, no sign that anyone had been in the vehicle when it crashed. Just an empty truck lying on its side in a ditch, wrecked and abandoned. I looked inside with my flashlight. The interior was different now, not clean like before, but old, decayed. The seats were rotted, the dashboard was cracked and faded, and there was mold growing on the floorboards. It looked like a truck that had been sitting in a field for 30 years, rusting and falling apart. But it hadn't been there 30 minutes ago. I'd driven past this spot twice tonight and there'd been nothing. Now there was a wrecked truck that looked like it had been here for decades. The tow truck arrived about an hour later. Clyde Robish show. I'd worked with him 100 times over the years. He looked at the truck in the ditch and shook his head. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "I found it here about an hour ago." "That's not what I mean. I mean, where did it come from? I've been towing vehicles off this stretch of highway for 25 years. I know every wreck that's ever happened here, every car that's ever gone in a ditch. I've never seen this truck before. Neither have I." He looked at me. "Well, someone's got to claim it." "You run the VIN?" "There's no VIN. No plates, no registration, no identifying marks. It's a ghost." I didn't mean to say that last part. It just came out. But as soon as I said it, I knew it was true. A ghost. That's what it was. A truck that appeared and disappeared, that showed up in different places in different conditions, that had no history and no owner and no explanation. Clyde didn't laugh. He just looked at the truck for a long moment, and then he said, very quietly, "I've heard stories about this stretch of road. Things people have seen in the fog. Lights out in the swamp, vehicles that aren't really there. I always figured it was just trucker talk, you know? Guys seeing things on long hauls. But now I don't know. What kind of stories? He hesitated. There was an accident here, back in the 80s. A truck went off the road, driver fell asleep or something. Hit the ditch at 70 miles an hour and rolled. The driver was killed. They never found the truck. What do you mean, they never found it? I mean, they never found it. The driver's body was in the ditch, but the truck was gone. They figured maybe it got stolen. Maybe somebody towed it off before the police arrived. But nobody ever came forward. The truck just disappeared. I looked at the wreck in the ditch. Dark blue or black, old, no plates. A truck that had disappeared in the 80s and had just now reappeared. Do you know the driver's name? Clyde thought about it. Something Boudreaux, I think. Or maybe it was Broussard. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. I went back to the station and looked up accidents on I-10 from the 1980s. It took a while. The old records weren't digitized, but eventually I found it. February 4th, 1987. A truck driver named Warren Broussard, age 41, had lost control of his vehicle near mile marker 64 and gone off the road. He'd been thrown from the cab and killed instantly. The truck had not been recovered. The report included a description of the vehicle. Dark blue Chevrolet pickup, 1979 model, Louisiana license plate number that was now more than 30 years out of date. The description matched what I'd been seeing all night. Warren Broussard's truck. On the road for over 30 years after his death, appearing and disappearing in the fog. I went back to the highway the next night. I'm not sure why. Maybe I needed to see it again. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that it had really happened. The fog was thinner that night, but it was still there, wisps of white drifting across the road. I drove to mile marker 64. The ditch was empty. Clyde had towed the wreck away that morning. But I parked on the shoulder and got out anyway. I stood there for a long time, looking at the spot where the truck had been. I thought about Warren Broussard, falling asleep at the wheel in 1907, dying on this stretch of road. I thought about his truck, disappearing that night and reappearing 33 years later to... what? To show itself? To find someone who would see it? I didn't know. I didn't understand. But I stood there anyway, paying my respects, I guess. Acknowledging what had happened. Acknowledging that something had been out here all those years, waiting for someone to notice. I was about to get back in my cruiser when I saw the headlights. They were out in the swamp, moving slowly through the trees. 2 pale circles, the same as before. They stopped when I turned to look at them. Just sat there watching me. I watched them back. I don't know how long, maybe a minute, maybe 5. Then they started moving again, heading east, away from me. They disappeared into the fog, and the sound of an engine faded with them. I got in my cruiser and drove away. I didn't follow them this time. I figured I'd seen enough. I never saw the truck again. I worked that stretch of highway for another 3 years before I retired, and I never saw it. Not the old wreck, not the vanishing vehicle, not the headlights in the swamp. Whatever it was, whatever Warren Broussard's truck had been trying to do, maybe it was done. Maybe showing itself one time was enough. Maybe being seen was all it wanted. Or maybe it's still out there. Maybe it only appears in certain conditions. Fog, late at night, certain times of year. Maybe someone else will see it one day. Maybe someone else will stand on that shoulder and watch the headlights move through the swamp and wonder what it means. If they do, I hope they remember Warren Broussard. I hope they remember that he died on that road in 1987, and his truck was never found. I hope they understand that whatever they're seeing, it's not just a trick of the fog. It's something that was lost, something that's been out there a long time, trying to be seen. trying to come home. That's my story. That's what happened on I-10 in January of 2020. I can't explain it. I won't try to explain it. But I'll tell you this. The next time you're driving through Louisiana at night, and the fog comes in thick, and you see headlights on the shoulder that don't belong to any vehicle you can find, don't assume you're imagining things. Don't assume it's a trick of the light. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something that's been out there a long time, waiting. Maybe it's something that wants to be seen. I've got one more thing to tell you. One more thing that happened after all the rest. A few months after I retired, I got a call from Clyde Robichaux. He said he'd found something in the wreck. Something he hadn't noticed when he towed it, but discovered later when he was cleaning out his yard. It was a wallet, wedged under the bench seat, hidden in a crack. He'd taken the truck apart for scrap, and the wallet had fallen out when he moved the seat. I drove over to his place and picked it up. It was old. The leather cracked and faded, but I could still open it. Inside was a driver's license. Louisiana, expired 1987. The photo was water-damaged and hard to see, but the name was clear. Warren Broussard. I looked at that license for a long time. Then I looked at Clyde. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked. He shrugged. I figured maybe his family would want it, if there's anybody left. I tracked down Warren Broussard's family, a daughter living in Houma. She was in her 50s now, had been a teenager when her father died. I drove down there and gave her the wallet. She cried when she saw it. She told me that they'd never found any of his personal effects after the accident. No wallet, no keys, nothing. Just his body in the ditch and an empty space where his truck should have been. I didn't tell her about the truck reappearing 33 years later. I didn't tell her about the headlights in the swamp, or the engine sounds, or the way the vehicle appeared and disappeared in the fog. I figured some things are better left unsaid. Some things don't help anyone to know. But when I was leaving, she said something that made me stop. "My father loved that truck," she said. "It was the first thing he ever bought with his own money. He took care of it like it was his child." When he died, I always wondered what happened to it. I always wished I could have seen it one more time. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, maybe he wished the same thing. Maybe that's why it came back. She didn't understand what I meant. I didn't explain. Some things are better left unsaid. But I think about it sometimes. I think about Warren Broussard dying on that highway in 1987, and his truck disappearing. I think about it out there in the swamp all those years, waiting, and then appearing again in 2020, to me, to anyone who would see it, so that his wallet could be found and returned to his family, so that something of him could come home. Maybe that's what ghosts are. Maybe they're not trapped spirits or restless souls. Maybe they're just things that got lost waiting for someone to find them, waiting for someone to notice, to see, to understand. And when they're finally seen, when they're finally understood, they can rest. I hope Warren Broussard is resting now. I hope his truck is finally at peace. I hope that when I drive past mile marker 64 in the fog, there's nothing there, just road and swamp and darkness. But if there is something there, if the headlights appear in the trees and the engine rumbles in the distance, I'll know what it means. Someone's trying to come home. Someone's waiting to be seen.